First of all, I should say that what you describe as a Christian mode of thinking may have come from Judaism and certainly continued to Islam. And it's not really the case that we don't have sources, because we have sources, only that sources tell us what they want us to hear. We have, and I've written about it somewhere else, we have people telling about their conversion. And they, in the Islamic world, Jews converting to Islam, Muslims from one school converting to another, leaving philosophy and becoming theologians. I mean, there is a plethora of people describing their own conversion, and they describe it as a clear-cut moment where it happens. So they tell us a narrative which they want us to believe in. So there's a dream. They had a dream one night and woke up the next morning with a different personality. Or there's a typical, at the age of 40, always at the age of 40, you go to bed one night and you had a dream, and either Aristotle or the Prophet Muhammad or someone appears to you and you change your identity. Or we have people telling, and we had an example of that here, people telling about the conversion about a person because he was suddenly accused of something and this was the only way. So they focus on an occasion. So it's not a typical Christian thing, it's the story that they tell us. Now, I agree that the term identity does not fit the way they think. They don't think about themselves as, they don't use the term identity. They think, at least in this world, they think of themselves as belonging to this or that community. And there, theoretically, you have to make a choice. You're either, you go to the synagogue or you go to the mosque. That's the choice. Now, we have an interesting anecdote told about the Almohad Caliph who forced the Jews and Christians to convert. And then he says, about the Jews, I have a problem. Because had I known that they are really Muslims, then it would be fine. We would give them our daughters to marry and they would be Muslims. Had I known that they really fake it and they don't really convert, then I would kill them and we would not have a problem. But I don't know. I don't know. So he's looking to understand the sincerity of the conversion, and he says, I don't know. So they go to the mosque and they teach their children the Quran, and the rest is between them and their God. So there is a concept of something happening inside, which is not identity and not faith exactly, but something in between. The question of the filled glass, half, again, it is not the terms that they usually, they speak about a change of heart, a new heart that you get. Or when you speak of someone of you or your community who converted, they speak about someone who put on the cloak of another religion, assuming that you cannot really change your heart. So they try, or they keep trying to push us to, not to the blurred personality, but to something decisive. I'm glad you like the term passages. I agree that it is not a conversion, but it doesn't work in all cases. I think it works in these particular cases, and I would like to take very briefly another Jewish family, the case of another Jewish family, also famous. Granada, 10th century, there is a Jewish poet who is a court vizier, who is also a general, Samuel Hanagid, who is definitely a Jew and definitely speaks in Arabic. I also only spoke about men, but in this family there is also a woman, his daughter. We have him exchange, have a kind of a competition of poetry with his daughter in Arabic. The poetry is in Arabic. His son also became a vizier and remained a Jew. So we have a second generation which ends with a pogrom because this is too much. So the family in the court doesn't always work in this. I took this family because it's unusual, not because it's typical. You pointed rightly to the fact that the myth of the convivencia seems to work very nicely here. And I go back to what I said at the beginning, that to the extent that the myth reflects some reality, and it does, it's all over the Muslim world. It's not Andalus. I'm watching the news like everyone here, and the particular places that are now on the news, Mosul, Raqqa, Aleppo, these are the places that had a convivencia, sometimes better than in some periods in Granada. There we have amazing stories of convivencias of Jews, Christians, except it's not called convivencia, but it's there all over the Muslim world. Basically because of this koine, cultural koine, also because of the tolerance of relative tolerance, very relative, but still there, of the ruling class. So it's not al-Andalus. Focusing on al-Andalus, I think the reason we got used to focus on al-Andalus is, there are several reasons, but one of the main and interesting reasons is because al-Andalus is Spain and it's Europe, and we focus on Europe. But it's not more in Europe than it was in Syria at the time. But it was there, and it's something to look up to. And finally, I think that when you speak about, you very rightly say, well, there are fuzzy borders, let's accept them. And I think that here you realized something that I didn't present very clearly, which is part of the problem is not even in the sources. Part of the problem is in modern scholarship. It's the modern scholars who want to have a very neat identity. I'll just end my comments to your comments with another anecdote. We have cases of discussions, Jewish discussions, not in Andalus, or Andalus, North Africa, Iraq. There are legal discussions of whether or not it is allowed to drink the wine of Muslims. And the very question shows us that things are not as clear-cut as we think of them. Normally, Jews are not allowed to drink the wine of Christians, but we assume that Muslims don't drink wine. So the question of the wine of Muslims, first of all, tell us that there was such a thing. And then we have the Jews, the response to that is, yes, you are theoretically allowed to drink the wine of Muslims, but if you drink the wine of Muslims, then you sit in a drinking party and the next step would be conversion. But on the other hand, if you say no, it's very impolite. So drink a little, don't drink too much. I think this is the blurred, fuzzy borders that you talked about.
I would like, after having heard what you have said, a little bit to clarify what I meant with my term Christian idea of conversation. Having heard what you have said, my impression is I was not very clear-cut in defining. And so I make a second attempt. When John Chrysostom is criticizing people, we are talking on Antioch in the 4th century, criticizing people entering at the same time a Christian church, a synagogue, and a pagan feast. Then he is not saying you are not devoted enough to Christianity, but he is giving an abstract rule, it's not allowed. So there are some conventions, I'm allowed to enter something and others not. And asking why I'm not allowed, he is expressing synagogue is a dangerous place, and pagan feast too. Because in the pagan feast there are demons, and those demons can harm you and all these things. So to my impression, Christian is perhaps a little bit imprecise, the idea of a deep inner personal devotion. That conversion has a kind of internal hierarchy. First idea of conversation, I bought new books. Second idea, new clothing. But the highest thing I can do in conversation, in conversion, is a deeper inner devotion. This idea of a deeper inner devotion, perhaps Christian is the wrong idea, because there are, without any doubt, also Jewish sources, is linked to a certain epoch in European history of ideas. To the history, we are deeply coined in our idea of conversion by 18th, 19th century, and the idea my inner self has some devotions, and there is a hierarchy of devotions, and I'm devoted to wine, I'm devoted to my wife or my husband or whatever, and then to one God. And my impression is, you're probably right, this is no Christian idea in the sense, a Christian-specific idea, but to my impression, a concept of conversion which we have always in mind. We are hierarchizing those different aspects. It's pure ritual or pure cultural. And the wonderful thing of your way of describing was to destroy this kind of hierarchy and to present there in certain situations, regions, families, contexts, complete new rearrangements, and the hierarchy is always defined in a new sense by different, by social phenomena, by cultural phenomena, by theologians, and there is no inherent hierarchy in the term conversion.
There is, there is. For Muslims too, in this period, there is this, they don't present it in the same words, but there is the expectation of getting to something that is total Islam, total devotion, not just submission as is in this new book, but devotion. And we see it perhaps in the best way in the poetry of those who do not accept it. Yeah. So you have the Sufis, or some Sufis, who would say, my heart prays in Mecca or in the synagogue, or in the, this is not the usual thing. When they say it, this is a rebellion. For the Muslims, authority, for the John Chrysostoms of Islam, there is a hierarchy of devotion, and you are expected, if you convert, to move your heart in this direction. Sociologically, it doesn't work that way, not always. And I think one last thing is that there is a difference when we examine individual cases and when we speak. I didn't answer to your education question, which is an excellent question. There is a difference of whether we discuss individuals or we discuss communities. When we discuss individuals, we sometimes see that indeed education is not the issue at all. But when we speak of large communities and we try to understand what kept the community together, so maybe education is not the right word, but some kind of firm hold on their own religion. But maybe this is what we see when we don't look at individuals. Maybe if we look at one case after the other, we will find that this is not the case.